Hey everyone, we'll begin in just a few minutes. For those who just joined, we'll begin in just a few minutes. Great, let's get started. Hi everyone, my name is Victoria Milligan. I'm the Channel and Field Marketing Manager for the East Coast over here at Critical Start. Thank you so much for joining our Lunch and Learn Finding the Perfect MDR Match. Before we get started, I do have a couple housekeeping items. You all should be muted, but if you're not, please be sure your line is muted to reduce any background noise during the presentation. We will have time for Q&A at the end of the webinar, but you can submit your questions at any time through the Q&A and chat functionality. Today's Lunch and Learn is being recorded, and you'll receive a follow-up emailing, including the recording after the webinar. You'll also be receiving an email from Uber Eats with your $25 voucher within 24 hours of the conclusion, and will be good until next Wednesday, February 15th. Now let's get to the good stuff. I'm going to hand it over to Randy Watkins, our Chief Technology Officer. Randy, all you.
Thanks, Victoria. Appreciate everybody joining. My name is Randy Watkins. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for Critical Start. I've been here for, going on 11 years. And really what I'm going to dig into today is a couple of things. First, we'll set the stage for why MDR is so important and why it's having an increasing role in organization cybersecurity posture. Then we'll go into Critical Start's offering, what makes us a little bit different, and kind of talk about some of the features and functionality that you're going to want to look for in any MDR if that's on your roadmap for this coming year. So there's plenty of attacks out there, and we have a handful of marketing slides here that really show the attacks are increasing. They're getting more complex. There's more TTPs that attackers are taking advantage of. All the stuff that we see on a day-to-day basis. And bottom line is they're not going anywhere, and alerts are really difficult to get through, right? I mean, if we look at the study, this was a study that was commissioned by us, but kind of run by IDC, an independent third party. They actually have a lot of great papers. So if you don't check out IDC and you're traditionally looking at Forrester and Gartner, I would encourage you to check out some of the IDC papers. They do a great job on their write-ups. But essentially what we saw was when you look at the amount of time it takes to resolve actionable alerts or true positives versus the amount of time it takes to look at false positives, it's roughly the same. And in some instances, it takes a little bit longer to prove out a false positive because we always operate under the assumption that an alert is probably bad until we start to get down a path and say, okay, well, we can determine now that this is a false positive. We spend a lot of time trying to do root cause analysis just to get down to, oh, this isn't a bad thing at all. So when we start looking at the problem of resolving the alerts at scale, it starts here, because not every alert is going to be a true positive. Actually, the exact opposite. Most alerts are going to be false positives, but they take a similar amount of time to resolve. And what that means is we don't have time to get through every alert, right? So if we look at what happens with alerts that we just don't have the time for, they're largely ignored. So if you look at this is another stat from that same study. And again, it's a great study that was done about a year and a half ago, something like that. You can check it out on IDC's website. I think we have it hosted as well. But if you look at organizations with 5,000 plus employees, they're ignoring 23% of alerts. And that's the lowest amount, right? 30% of alerts for 1,500 to 5,000 and 27% for 500 to 1,500 employees. That's a lot of accepted risk. I mean, if you think about what's happening there, alerts are being generated. Maybe they don't reach a certain threshold, or maybe they're notoriously noisy rules, so we just kind of brush them off to the side. That's what most MDR providers do to get through the alerts, because they have the same problems you do, right? There's too many alerts, not enough time. So what do? There's two primary ways that we've historically gotten through those alerts. The first method is priority oriented, where we're looking at the criticals, we're looking at the highs, but never really looking at the mediums and lows. And I'll definitely dive into why that's important a little bit later on with an example. The second model is input oriented. And in this, we're kind of shutting off different rules, speeds, and feeds, ones that are maybe more susceptible or prone to shooting off false positives, right? But if you turn those off, what you're really doing is you're decreasing the effectiveness of your product to identify malicious behavior. You're lessening your ROI because you don't have the ability to get through the alerts. And this is a global problem. And what's really happening is attackers are modifying their TTPs to look more and more like administrative behaviors and use what we call lol bins, or live off the land binaries. Administrative tools that are built into Microsoft, they're built into Linux, or built into Mac, but they can be abused for malicious purposes. So all of that noise kind of creates this conundrum where we have way too many alerts coming in. The alerts are taking too long to resolve. And at the end of the day, we end up just ignoring upwards of 20% of all the alerts. And what that really is accepted risk. And attackers take advantage of this. And this is definitely not new data, but the attackers are living in our environments for hundreds of days before they're discovered and contained, right? And attackers do their most damage in the first probably month or so. Usually the initial foothold comes in pretty quick. They lay low for a minute, make sure that that foothold's going to persist. Then they'll move laterally, establish further persistence with registry keys, additional user accounts, things like that. Then they'll finally start to move towards their goal of exfiltrating data or destroying things. And that's usually about the 30 to 60 day mark. The additional time is usually nothing. Either that or they're lingering in the environment, slowly exfiltrating data, but the damage has already been largely done. We just still haven't found it yet. So attackers are taking advantage of these lol bins and the massive surplus of alerts to really just hang out in the environment for quite a while. I believe the slides will be available. The recording will definitely be available. And I have the Q&A popped up as well as the chat. So if you do have questions, feel free to pop them in there. So what does Critical Start do? We simplify breach prevention, right? I mean, breach prevention is a really complex and fully loaded term. But what we really focus on is detecting the right threats, responding with the right actions, and adapting to your business. That last piece is key, right? Because there's a lot of companies that say, hey, we detect the right threats and respond with the right actions. But if they don't adapt to your business, then that means your business has to adapt to their model. And if their model doesn't fit your business, then it's just going to be, kind of shoehorning something on, which is maybe better than nothing, but certainly not the best you can get, and not what your organization needs. So what we focus on is maturing your security investment. We leverage existing products that are in your environment. We'll cover those. We focus on scaling and creating efficiency, meaning we're not going to escalate every alert back to you. We should be able to get rid of a substantial amount of those alerts. Again, most alerts are false positives coming in. We should be able to get rid of a lot of those without requiring your team to spend their time investigating these alerts. We want to speed up the protection, right? We want to, from day one, we want to have an element of monitoring in place while we get you to full 24/7 production monitoring. And we want to increase your resource flexibility. And what that means is really give your tier 1, tier 2 analysts the ability to move up and level up inside the organization, become a more pivotal role, focus on things like vulnerability management, identity and access management. We all know that there's way too many projects on the security team's plate to have folks focused on resolving tier 1 and 2 alerts that are going to be false positives anyways. So it's really about offloading a lot of the menial work that can be done outside of the organization and refocusing those resources on things that are truly valuable and add additional resiliency to your organization's security posture. This is a architecture slide that I want to walk through and really point out a couple of the differences in how we do what we do. So we start off by increasing visibility. We tie into a number of different EDR, XDR, and SIEM platforms. Again, I'll cover those in a future slide and go through kind of all the manufacturers we support. But when I say increased visibility, I don't just mean building the integration. Critical Start leverages very deep API integration into all of our partners. And we use that for a couple of different things, starting off with a configuration review. If we're going to monitor your EDR, XDR, SIEM platform, we need to make sure that it's configured properly to be the most effective at detecting malicious behavior. So we use those APIs to look at the configurations. We look through all the different settings and we make sure that it is configured per the manufacturer's best practices and recommendations. We really want you to see a true ROI from the product. And if we go through and shut everything off, that's not really going to give much of an ROI. So everything starts with configuration audit. After we do that configuration audit, we inject our own threat intelligence. We have what we call our cyber research unit, and I'll cover that in more depth a little bit later. But what that really is threat intelligence and detection engineering working together to create additional correlation logic and put that right into your product. Again, our platform is not a black box. We're not doing a bunch of detections on the back end and kind of masking you from it. We're pushing those detection rules back into your product to make them even more effective. So you get 100% ROI from the product in enabling all of its capabilities. And then you get past that when we inject our own intelligence into it. Now, the last thing we use that API connection for initially is to ingest the alerts, right? So now we bring in all the alerts into our platform. It's called the Zero Trust Analytics Platform, ZTAP. We're a security company, so we had to make at least 2 acronyms. ZTAP is the first, and our Trusted Behavior Registry, or TBR, is the second. So we ingest every single alert into ZTAP. And that's super critical because we don't want to fall victim to one of the things I was just talking about, which is missing true positives because we don't have the ability to get through all the alerts. And these attackers are living in the mediums and lows. So we ingest every single alert, it comes into ZTAP, and it gets bounced off of our Trusted Behavior Registry. The TBR is essentially a catalog of all known good and expected alerts that are expected behaviors that still generate alerts. So they're false positives, but here's where there's a slight nuance. Some things are globally known good, right? Microsoft, when Outlook launches, it bypasses kernel. It bypasses the kernel because it knows where the address space is it wants to go, and it writes directly to memory. That's a cross-process memory write, fires off alerts, but it's Outlook. So in our Trusted Behavior Registry, we can say, if we see this behavior coming from Outlook.exe, running with a hash that we know belongs to Outlook, running under the specific user context, and it's writing to this location, which it always writes to, this is known good and expected behavior for all of our customers because Outlook is going to run the exact same way at Critical Start as it does at most of your organizations. And if it's a slight nuance, we'll capture that, right? Then we build an adapted Trusted Behavior Registry for your organization. That means that any custom compiled applications, any administrative behaviors, any sort of penetration tests, vulnerability scans, we're going to capture that and understand how that operates in your environment and not escalate those alerts to you over and over again. We can safely resolve those because we know that you're expecting that level of behavior. So the Trusted Behavior Registry, or TBR, is human curated. Our analysts are building it as they learn more about your environment and identify false positives out in the wild that still generate alerts. Now, what we're not doing is arbitrarily filtering these based on some risk score that we deem important enough, right? If it doesn't match the trusted behavior registry, which says under these exact conditions, we can safely resolve this alert, then it goes to our 24/7 security operations center for additional investigation and resolution. Now, our analysts have really one of three different decisions that they can make. One, false positive. This is an unsigned binary making a network connection, but it's Dropbox. It's operating out of a path that we know belongs to Dropbox. It's a hash that we can validate belongs to Dropbox, and it's connecting to IP addresses we know belong to Dropbox. This is globally known good. It's expected. Great. Let's safely resolve it and move on. Second option is this is bad, right? This is an attacker that's moving laterally. They're passing golden tickets. It's a piece of ransomware, malware, something like that. We need to respond, and we will respond. Now, what's unique about our offering is you can dictate how we respond and what we respond to. So if you say, hey, go ahead and isolate anything in the environment except for my CEO's laptop, no problem. We'll go ahead and kind of cut the attacker off at the knees where we can. And if it touches the CEO's laptop, we're going to raise the flag and say, hey, we would love for you to isolate this host or give us the permissions to do so. Now, the third option is we escalate something to you. Maybe it's one of those things that you told us not to isolate, like the CEO's laptop. Maybe it's an internal application that we've not seen before. Maybe it's administrative behavior that's not malicious, but we don't know that it's good behavior. And again, if we don't know something is good, if we can't prove that it's good, if we haven't seen it before, we assume it's bad and we do the investigation. Everything is guilty until proven innocent in our eyes, right? So we escalate that to you. We've changed the interaction model that your resources and you have to use to communicate with our SOC. Everybody sends emails, most places will give phone calls, and we do both of those. But we also wanted to make a very flexible interaction model. If you kind of go out to dinner with your family and you're sitting there eating, we escalate something to you, you don't want to get an email, leave dinner, grab your laptop tethered to a hotspot. We've created a mobile app for iOS and Android. It's a native application. And it allows you to do literally everything from your phone you can do from our web portal. So now if we escalate something to you, you get it, you read our analyst comments, which are all formatted and standardized, so it can be read, digested, and acted on in a minute or less. You read through those comments, you can do the investigation from your phone, and from your phone, you can either chat back with our analysts, or you can use APIs back into your product to isolate the host. Isolate the host, disable the user account, revoke session tokens, whatever it is. All right, so we've really enabled the team to be mobile and really work on the go, freeing up resources and allowing you to, again, be flexible with your resource allocation, knowing that you can respond from anywhere at any time without having to be inconvenienced. Now, here's an example I like to go through of a true incident response that we did. We got called in. It was a financial institution. They got hit with Lockbit ransomware, is Ragnar Lockbit. We went in, did the incident response. They had an MDR. The MDR alerted them to the ransomware execution. Great, right? They alerted them to it. They started to isolate, but by the time they got the isolation done, there was, I think it was 14 different hosts that were impacted. Cool. We went in, started doing the remediation. We grabbed all of the logs from their EDR platform and ran it through ZTAP just to see what was there. What we found was the attacker was in the environment for 32 days before they actually launched the ransomware. And this is pretty indicative of what we're seeing. Attackers have learned that if they just blow ransomware across the environment, a lot of times newer EPP platforms will stop it. So what they do instead is they go interactive in the environment. They move laterally, they gather information, and the ransomware is really just a parting gift, right? It's just a thank you, see you soon. So what happened in this environment was they compromised an endpoint, they scraped some credentials, they moved laterally. They may have gotten credentials off the endpoint if we were monitoring it, but all of these alerts were low and mediums, things that we resolved that other MDR provider did not resolve. So they might have been able to touch the endpoint. The initial compromise and credential scraping took place over the course of about 5 minutes, right? It took them another 3 days to move laterally, right? They sat there with the credentials for a while, then they started to move laterally. They targeted the domain controller, made a C2 connection, established persistence, then they launched the Lockbit, and they exfiltrated some data from that domain controller before they launched Lockbit as well. But we would have been able to stop this and contain the threat before they were moving laterally. We identified the initial compromise, we identified the compromised credentials, and we would have been able to reset those user passwords long before they were moving across the environment, definitely long before they were targeting domain controllers. It took them about 2 weeks to find the domain controllers. And then they sat around while they established persistence for another week and a half or so. And then they finally launched the ransomware. So this just goes to show the importance of resolving every single alert. Every alert that's not resolved is accepted risk. It doesn't matter if it's a false positive or a true positive. You don't know that until you investigate it. Unless you investigate every one of those, it's just accepting risk. Now, we rely very heavily on deep API integrations. It is critically important for us. We use them for a number of things, including that onboarding that I talked about, the configuration check, dumping in our own threat intelligence, ingesting the alerts. We also use them for investigation, right? If we need to go back and pull child process, parent process, network connections, or if we need to do remediation, things like disabling user accounts containing hosts, stuff like that, we use deep API integrations. And these are the folks that we've built those integrations with for now. We're always expanding this portfolio, but if you look across the line here, the top line and middle is going to be a lot of EDR, and then we have a couple of supported SIMs at the bottom. That EDR and EPP suite is really going to be pivotal, right? That's the best place for investigation, best place for response. Everything touches an endpoint sooner or later. So we really want to get that EDR visibility. And then with the SIM support, we can bring in all those different third-party products and kind of round out the view and the vision that we get. And the Defender suite, Microsoft suite, extremely powerful, everything from Defender for Identity, Defender for Office. We definitely tie in, make the most out of your E5. With Cortex, we were design partners for XIM. We do have support for that. So if you're growing that footprint, we just released Trend Micro, which has a huge user base, very solid technology, been in the market for decades. SentinelOne and CrowdStrike have always been best of breed standalone, and VMware, Carbon Black, and Cylance were kind of pioneers in the space. With Managed Sentinel and Splunk, we also have fully managed offerings, or Microsoft Sentinel and Splunk. We have fully managed offerings that handle everything from custom parsers, dashboards, correlation logic, and even ingest analysis for Microsoft Sentinel to make sure that you're bringing in the data sources that matter and you're not paying extra for the ones that don't. Now, with this, I believe we have a poll question to really touch on what EDRs are you using? Which of these products do you have in your environment and which are kind of sticking around? A lot of folks have different strategic initiatives to migrate one way or another over the next couple of years, but what do you have in your environment right now, or what are you moving to in the next kind of 3 to 6 months? Results coming in, looks like a lot of Defender, some CrowdStrike, pretty common. And actually one of our most common pairings, because we do support all these products at the same time. If you have CrowdStrike and Defender and Cortex with a little bit of Trend Micro sprinkled in, no problem, we'll cover it all. But one of the things we see most commonly is CrowdStrike on servers, Defender on endpoints, and then Microsoft Sentinel in the environment. Comes up all the time. It's because Defender is included for E5, but only for the users that are licensed. Defender for server is an extra cost. Most organizations already had CrowdStrike and they were transitioning into Defender, so it just made sense to keep it. But this is great. Looks like final results are 5 for CrowdStrike, 4 for Defender, and 1 for SentinelOne. That's kind of tweaking as we go. Now I want to talk a little bit about ZTAP. Boom. So ZTAP is the platform that our analysts operate in. Again, it is not a black box. That was one of the things that annoyed me the most when I was on the customer side, on your side, was I had an MDR, MSSP at the time, and I had no idea what was going on the back end, right? So ZTAP is 100% transparent. You can see literally everything our analysts do. You can work right alongside of them. You can escalate internally. You can work on alerts. You can isolate hosts. You see an entire timeline of who touched what, when, and why. And that's really important for us too, because we offer contractual SLAs, right? Everything that we do TTD and TTR is 1 hour or less contractually obligated, right? There's actual pain for us involved. And when you look at other MDRs, you may see SLOs or service level objectives where they have a goal, but no real teeth to it, right? They're not going to get penalized. It's sorry, we'll try harder next time. Or you'll see SLAs only applied to critical and high, but forget about the mediums and lows, or mediums and lows are best effort, or they're 2 weeks out. Our SLAs are really, really easy to explain. 1 hour TTD, 1 hour TTR, every alert we ingest. That means from the point in time we ingest it to the point in time we act on it, we escalate it, we close it, we isolate it, 1 hour or less. It's pretty easy. And why that's important in regards to the dashboard is we show you that right up front, right? We track TTD, we track TTR, we show you SLA violations. We really want to make the MDR provide value in a way that you would provide value for your own organization if you had all the resources that we've built internally, right? So in our dashboards, we also want to prove that value. So again, right up top, ROI, last couple of days, or this is the last 30 days, 21-minute TTD, 32-minute TTR, 24/7 monitoring. We show you that equivalent cost over the last 30 days based on resolving every single alert that we ingested. So we really do focus on providing that value, improving that value out through our dashboards. We are huge in mapping into MITRE. We split it across all the different techniques. We have a product, and I believe I have a slide in here called Threat Navigator. We use Threat Navigator to push out all of our own detection logic mapped to MITRE, and also showing kind of the hit rate and everything like that. And here is that tracking for TTD and TTR, not just for our team, but also for yours, right? If we look at every alert in an hour, so say we look at an alert, I think the TTR on the last one was 32 minutes. We escalate something to you after 32 minutes, and your team looks at it in 30 days. The TTR for that alert is 32 minutes and 30 days, right? We may be waiting on a response, and we don't want to do that. So we put in some efficiency metrics really for the SOC manager, SOC director to look at it and say, okay, what's our TTD? What's our TTR? Who's taking on the most alerts? Why do they have that many alerts? Do we need to spread this out a little bit further? What's the TTD and TTR by user? So it's really a way to improve your overall security posture just by looking at the alert distribution. Now, this data was pulled from demo environment. We don't expect 29 alerts to be escalated to a single user in a given month, unless you're a very, very, very large environment. Usually our customers see anywhere between 1 and 3 alerts a day, depending on the size of the organization. But one user typically doesn't end up with 30 of them assigned to them. Now, again, with that transparency, and you see kind of left to right on the hanky chart up top, we're adding a substantial amount of detections to these different products. 13,000 alerts were generated on IOCs from this particular demo environment in the last 30 days, but we show you the entire alert flow. Everything that went in, how it got resolved, what went to our SOC, what was a true positive, what happened at a true positive, what's still open, what's waiting for your resolve. And then we map all of those alerts right back to the MITRE framework. So you can see like, hey, we should probably start with the alerts that are under command and control, and then work our way through lateral movement, credential access, and the like. So really making some actionable dashboards, things that provide true insight into the organization to not just improve the MDR, but really help you get the biggest return out of the MDR and improve your overall security posture and program by focusing on those alerts that really matter to the organization. Now, as if all of those dashboards weren't enough, they're mobile, right? I talked about the value of the mobile SOC. Everything in the ZTAP platform is in the mobile SOC, right? Including the real-time alerting, the trending, the statistics, the dashboards, the communication with our analysts, and the resolution. And all of it is baked into the mobile SOC. And if you're communicating with our analysts, this is what you're communicating with. And this is one of my favorite things to talk about is our humans. And because you're buying a service, you're not just buying a technology. Technology is there, But it's really the service that you're buying. So 24/7, 365 is a gimme. That's table stakes. And it surprises me to find out that some of our competitors didn't always provide that. They leveraged more automation. So when you're looking at and kind of evaluating MDR providers, do ask about the human element. It is arguably the most important element of all. And the first element is how you scale alert resolution. We do that with a trusted behavior registry. You don't want somebody that does priority oriented or input oriented, because that's just arbitrarily accepting risk on your behalf without saying it outright. So that's kind of first and foremost. Second is, who are the people on the back end that are delivering the service? All of our analysts are in Dallas, Texas, right? I'm in Dallas, Texas. All of our analysts sit here. We have a very large facility. We are SOC 2 Type 2 and PCI certified. And all of our analysts go through a huge amount of training, 300 hours of training upfront, right? That's a pretty substantial amount of training. It's over an 8-week time period. I honestly don't know if I could qualify to be a tier 1 analyst anymore. That training is difficult. It's developed in-house. It's revamped after every class of analysts goes through. That class will provide feedback to the instructors. The instructors will take that, modify the coursework, put it right back into the training. And when we bring in the next group of analysts, they'll have the latest and greatest training, right? It's a substantial amount of training. And then they go through at least 80 hours. I think this needs to be updated. Last poll I took was about 120 hours of CE every year. And that's everything from manufacturer specific certifications to generic certifications, INSEC Plus, any of those ones, CISP, CISAs. We have a number of folks who have done the offensive security testing. I am pretty solid knowledge set built throughout the SOC. And what we do with all that is we keep it in-house, right? 90%, greater than 90% employee retention rate over the last 7 years. And I think it's actually 94% employee retention over the last 7 years. We don't lose our folks. We have career pathing built internally to move them from a tier 1 to a tier 2. Once they hit that tier 2 level, they can move up to a tier 3. They can go into our incident response. They can go into our threat intelligence. They can go into detection engineering. They can go into SIM engineering, onboarding. The only 2 roles they can't go into are customer success and project management. For those 2 roles, we have to hire seasoned customer success managers and project managers. The project managers are responsible for getting you into full 24/7, resolving every alert production monitoring as quickly as possible. And the customer success managers are your single point of contact to get anything you need in critical start once you become a customer. So they are the voice of the customer internally. They have full access to every resource you could ever want, including executive briefings, including tours of our SOC, including roadmap reviews, product enhancements and questions, engineering reviews on specific alerts. They're really your hand-holding kind of liaison into the organization. So we have a ton of resources internally, and most of those resources start in the SOC. So they have tales from the trench. They've been there, done that. They know how it works. And again, they are eyes on glass, butts in seats, 24/7 out of Dallas, Texas. And with that, I think we have another poll question. Does your organization require 24/7, 365 monitoring? Now, I see some not sure's coming up, lots of yeses, some no's. For the no's, I'd be really curious to know what industry you're in. Because what we're seeing is a lot of attacks happen after hours. And for 2 reasons. One, nation states are on the opposite side of the globe. So usually their workday starts when our workday ends. So they start hitting after hours. Second thing is local attackers understand that the security team is going to be looking at alerts during the daytime. So a lot of times they pivot their attacks to the afternoon. However, we are starting to see a pivot back into daytime attacks just because they realize they can get lost in the alerts a little bit better. And MDRs are starting to increase. So 24/7, in my opinion, is a necessity. It looks like we have 9 people who agree, 3 people who say no, and 1 who's not sure. It's not always a compliance thing. It's a business risk decision. And at the end of the day, security is not stopping attackers. It's quantifying and enumerating business risk, presenting that up to senior management, getting them to either accept it or choose to mitigate or transfer it, and then fulfilling those wishes. So in some organizations, they say, we accept the risk of not 24/7 monitoring. Most do not. And they're starting to move towards managed detection and response providers. as a means to provide that 24/7 detection capability. There you go. So now I want to talk about our cyber research unit. Tons of value added here, and it is encompassed of two different things. Threat intelligence, big buzzword. Everybody has it. All MDR providers have some level of threat intelligence, speeds and feeds, IP addresses, domain names, something like that. We have those too. We subscribe to a large number of threat intel feeds that give us IP addresses and hashes and executable names and TTPs and stuff like that. We also have some human intelligence that we bring in from third parties, where it's different reports on attack groups and what industries are being targeted by who and how. And then we also have our own threat intel team that does dark web scraping. We do brand reputation monitoring, so we will look for your passwords to be out in the wild. We actually found a substantial amount of passwords from a healthcare provider. We were able to get those changed out relatively quickly. We also found the password, a domain admin password for a banking institution for sale on the dark web. We were able to identify that credential and get them to change it before any negative impact took place. And we monitored that credential the entire time until it was disabled and changed. So tons of information and value coming out of the threat intelligence team. But what's better is how it's operationalized. So in addition to the reports and the bulletins that we issue, and those are getting sent through MobileSoc as well as through ZTAP, we have a threat detection engineering team. And what they do is they take all this research that our CTI team develops, and they turn it into detections, native detections to your product set, and deploy those through Threat Navigator, which I talked about a little bit earlier. So again, we're increasing the value of those products that you already have in your environment. We're increasing that ROI. We're making them more effective at detecting attacks. And then we're the ones that are going through the alerts to act on them. So we're not giving you a whole bunch of new alerts to look at. We're giving us a whole bunch of new alerts to look at. And then we're using our platform to really scale that up and provide the effectiveness at detecting attacks with the efficiency of our MDR to make sure your team is not getting overwhelmed while we catch every attack that comes through the door. Now, we also have a true incident response team, right? We have incident response retainers, we have boots on ground, we have the ability to go in and do forensics, expert witness testimony, recovery capabilities, assuming there's some element of backup and restoration there. And it is, for the most part, tool agnostic. We will go in and we'll do log analysis and really look through a lot of different artifacts, memory dumps, whatever you'd expect from incident response. We do the full gamut of it. But what we also do is incorporate our monitoring into that. So we can monitor the environment 24/7 to look for new indicators of compromise while we're doing investigation and response on the existing compromise, right? So it's really hand in glove the way these two teams work together to really kind of identify the attacker, get them out, and make sure they don't get back in. Make sure we've closed every hole. We've identified all the persistence techniques. We're identifying additional C2. We find all of the exfiltrated data. It really is an end-to-end offering from, how do I get my E5 implemented? How do I get CrowdStrike installed? How do I stand up XIM? Great, it's stood up, it's monitored 24/7. Knock on wood, there's no incidents, but if there is, we have the full incident response lifecycle, including that incident response monitoring. Here's a real use case. It was a Microsoft customer. They had 184,000 security events coming in 1 month. And that's with everything turned on. It was with none of our detection logic, but we were able to reduce that to 9 a day. And that was within the first few months. Over time, they get further reduced as we start to learn more and more about the environment. So this was, I think it was month 3 when we took this measurement. And now I believe they're receiving 3 or 4 a day. Maybe it's 3 a day now. So tons of savings and without accepting risk is the big thing. I know when you look at how organizations scale, again, you really need to look at the method they're using to resolve those alerts. If they're using anything other than resolving every single alert that's generated, it's really just risk acceptance by another name. So I would encourage you to look into that if you have an existing MDR provider. If you're on the market for an MDR provider, look into those things. It's the people, the process, and the technology. all combined in one, and really approach it with a solid kind of RFP or list of things that are important to your organization, things that they would need to customize, things that MDR providers need to customize to really fit into your business, right? Again, you don't need to fit into somebody else's box. They need to fit into your organization and customize their offering for your business. That's really what we specialize in. It's what we built the MDR around. And it's something we take a lot of pride in, is providing value to our customers and providing the most reduced risk per dollar spent on MDR. That's it for the slides. I really appreciate all of you tuning in and listening to me talk. I know it's not easy. I've been told I have a face for radio and a voice for a mime. So again, I do appreciate the time. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer those now. And I believe we do have one poll question left. Very simply, are you interested in a Critical Start demo? Happy to crack open that ZTAP portal, dive into it, open up the mobile app, and show you guys a better way to administer security. Thanks again.
Awesome. As you guys are all filling out the poll, thank you so much, Randy. Just a few reminders, you'll be receiving a $25 Uber Eats voucher within the next 24 hours. And you can use that up until Wednesday, February 15th. Thank you so much for joining our Lunch and Learn, and we can't wait to see you at the next one. Thanks, everyone.